Close your eyes for a moment and step back into a British classroom in the 1970s. The wooden desks gleam with polish. The air carries a faint mix of chalk and floor cleaner, and a sudden hush falls as footsteps approach the door. You sit straighter without being told. Everyone does. Rules aren't written on posters. They live quietly in the room, understood by every child without a single word spoken. Back then, this was simply school. No debates, no explanations, no second chances offered aloud. Everyday routines carried an authority that feels almost unreal now, yet at the time it passed as ordinary, even sensible. Most people accepted it without question, and that acceptance is what's hardest to imagine today. Because when we look back with modern eyes, we realize how many moments from those classrooms would stop us short now, and how the world moved on from them. To understand those classrooms, we have to remember the Britain they belonged to. The country was still shaped by the aftermath of war, where order, routine, and doing as you were told were seen as strengths, not burdens. Daily life followed patterns, and school was designed to prepare children for a world that valued reliability over self-expression. Learning facts mattered, but learning your place mattered just as much. Classrooms were often full to the brim, rows of children sharing space and attention with few resources to spare. Teachers carried enormous responsibility, and authority was considered essential simply to keep things moving. Questioning decisions was rare, not because people lacked opinions, but because respect for position was deeply ingrained. You listened, you copied from the board, and you moved on. The rhythm of school days reinforced this order. Bells marked time precisely. Assembly halls echoed with quiet shuffling and familiar routines. Handwritten timetables were followed without fuss, and polished shoes were checked before lessons even began. It all felt normal, even comforting. Today, classrooms look and feel very different. Discussion is encouraged, well-being is prioritized, and support sits alongside structure. That contrast helps us understand why strictness once felt necessary and why it slowly faded as Britain itself began to change. Yet those older classrooms were mirrors of their time, reflecting a society that believed firmness built character, and that childhood was preparation, not protection. Understanding that mindset is key before we revisit the rules themselves and the memories today. Some rules were never written anywhere, yet every child knew them. The moment you sat down, your back stayed straight, your hands stayed still, and your eyes faced forward. You did not speak unless invited, and even then your voice stayed measured. Silence was never requested. It was simply expected, like breathing. Children learned these rules without ever being told, and that learning happened quickly. A shuffled chair, a wandering glance, a whispered word at the wrong moment could draw attention you didn't want. Often, it wasn't a formal response that lingered, but the sudden awareness of being seen. The heat in your face mattered more than any note in a book. You learned to read the room. You sensed when to lower your head, when to sit taller, when not to ask the question forming in your mind. Blending in became a skill, almost an instinct, sharpened day after day. For many pupils, survival meant staying unnoticed, finishing your work, and waiting for the bell. Today, classrooms encourage curiosity. Questions are welcomed, discussion is planned, and mistakes are part of learning. Back then, standing out rarely felt safe. The goal was not expression, but compliance, and those unwritten rules shaped behavior long after the desks were left behind. These quiet expectations didn't just control classrooms, they shaped memories, and for many, they still echo faintly whenever authority enters a room. That feeling followed former pupils into adulthood, surfacing unexpectedly in workplaces, meetings, and moments of quiet uncertainty today. Still, some moments from school stay sharper than any lesson ever taught. Not because they were loud or cruel, but because they unfolded in front of everyone else. A name spoken aloud. A pause that felt too long. The scrape of a chair as someone stood, suddenly aware of every eye in the room. Correction often happened publicly. A mistake on the page, a rule misunderstood, a movement at the wrong time could be addressed there and then. Nothing dramatic followed, yet the silence afterwards carried weight. You learned quickly how exposed a classroom could feel, how small a child could seem when attention settled on them. What lingered was the feeling, not the detail, the warmth rising in your face, the careful walk back to your seat. the way the rest of the lesson blurred as you tried to disappear again. Many people remember these moments more clearly than anything they were meant to learn that day. At the time, it was considered normal, even helpful. A lesson shared, it was thought, would be remembered, and it was, just not always in the way intended. The memory traveled home, replayed quietly at bedtime, and sometimes returned years later without warning. Today, correction is handled differently. Privacy matters. Confidence is protected. Yet those public moments still live on in recollection. Reminders of a classroom culture where learning and exposure sat uncomfortably close together. They form an important part of understanding how discipline once worked and why its echoes remain so strong. You can almost smell it before you see it. The sharp temps of floor polish, the chalk dust hanging in the air, the wooden desk cool beneath your fingers. It's a 1970s British classroom, moments before the teacher arrives, and the room settles into an uneasy stillness. No one needs instructions. Coats are off, eyes forward, voices disappear. Back then, this felt normal, even reassuring, like the rules of gravity. Yet listen closely, and you'll hear something else beneath the silence. A quiet tension, the knowledge that stepping out of line carried consequences everyone understood, but rarely discussed. Most people accepted this without question, and that's the part we forget. Today, many of those everyday routines would cause raised eyebrows or outright disbelief. But at the time, they were simply how school worked, shaping millions of childhoods in ways we only now beginning to revisit with fresh eyes, today, together. Step into a British classroom today, and the difference is immediate. Voices are heard, questions are encouraged, and care sits alongside learning. Safeguarding emotional awareness and child-centered approaches shape daily routines in ways that would have felt unfamiliar decades ago. What was once unquestioned is now discussed, explained, and adapted, not because the past was foolish, but because understanding has grown. Times didn't just change, understanding did. Looking back isn't about judgment, it's about perspective. Those old classrooms belong to their era, just as today's belong to ours. And it leaves one gentle question lingering. Which school rules do you remember that would never exist today?